Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome back to our Lovecraft Country recap and review show where we break down the latest episodes of HBO's new hit series, Lovecraft Country, over here on the FilmSpeak channel. I'm, of course, your host, Griffin Schiller, and over here on FilmSpeak, we like to say that this is the place where the conversation continues after the credits. And so, of course, this is a direct, sort of way of doing that. We love to break down the meaty stuff of each episode. And so if you like that, you enjoy that, you're definitely in the right place. Consider subscribing to the channel for more insight, analysis, and interviews behind your favorite movies. And of course, we're going to be talking about episode number 9, titled Rewind 1921. So we're going back in time for this one, and it is it's a powerful episode, to say the least. So before we go any further here, though, jump down in the comment section and let us know what your thoughts and opinions are on tonight's episode. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did it knock you on your ass when it was all said and done? Let's have a great discussion about the penultimate episode down in the comment section below. I am not alone, though. I am, of course, joined by Elliott from Movie Files, as always. Elliott, how's it going, buddy?
What's up, man? Yeah, man, I'm so excited to break this episode down because, like you just mentioned, it's the second to last episode, which is crazy, man. 9 weeks of this show, which has been a journey within itself. But yeah, this episode hit me on a level that I didn't think was going to be able to be topped by stuff like the Emmett Till tackling that story and the love story that we got with Gia and Tic. But man, this one just kicked my ass for sure, man. Well, I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess before we go into your overall thoughts, where would you sort of like rank this just in terms of the season thus far? Is it at the top of your list?
And we'll get into it when we break it down. The first half wasn't, collectively speaking, as cohesive as an entire episode, like we talked about with episode 6, with just Gia and Tic and everything that came within that story, and just the journey that we see with Ruby's character with the metamorphosis, or the journey that we see literally from Jurnee Smollett in episode 3 with the haunted house. I just feel like those from beginning to end just hit on so many different cylinders. Where this episode in the first half, I thought that the major reveals that we've been speculating about for weeks just kind of left the first half just a little bit lackluster. But then that second act really, to me, is like, if I were to think about just from a strong emotional standpoint, the second act of this episode really kind of stuck with me between any episode.
Right.
But collectively speaking, as an episode, it just wasn't my favorite. But that second act was just incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, if the second half of this episode was the entirety of the episode, I think that it would have probably been my favorite, just because it was so visceral and profound and dark. I mean, I think the show has a somewhat campy tone to it for a series that tackles really like intense subject matter and important subject matter. And I feel like that allows it to be a little bit more palatable, I guess, to like a wider audience and stuff like that. Yeah. In this episode, there's really no attempt to soften the blow of what happens when they go back in time and they're there during the Tulsa riots, and we're watching this town burn to the ground by white supremacists while we're watching Montrose talk about each and every single person that he knew in that town that was murdered. That's like, again, the first stuff was it took a little bit to get going. I understand its purpose, and I didn't really struggle with it, but it's like that second half is ultimately, like, even as we're just sitting here sort of going back and forth, that's the bit I'm thinking about. That's the stuff that really stuck with me.
It was beautifully told, and again, once we go to Tulsa 1921, that's where the stakes just went to another level. With, again, just looking at it from a sci-fi perspective, knowing time travel, like our favorite characters can get trapped in 1921, which I thought was going to happen towards the end of this episode with Montrose and Letitia. But just the idea of them going back in time and Montrose reliving those haunting, traumatic moments, him literally blocking out his potentially one of his first love interests of his young life, and Tommy, and forgetting his name, forgetting what he looked like, just because of how traumatic that moment was, and him reliving that, and Letitia, walking through. I mean, literally, dude, like the second half to me is just like, to me, that's where this show just, we talk about it on a weekly basis. It has its flaws, this unconventional storytelling with this anthology approach. But when you have episodes like this, especially in that back half, That's what makes the show so special to me and just so unique from anything I've ever seen, if I'm being honest.
Right. Well, and even before we started recording, it's just kind of interesting how, between Lovecraft Country and Watchmen, obviously there's a lot of parallels between the two while still being very different. The way that they have sort of, hammered home the horrors and the importance of the Tulsa massacre to the point where it's now like something that I think more people are aware of. It's out there in the zeitgeist and whatnot. That is, it can't be understated how important that is. I mean, we were just talking about this before we went live. It's like the first time you had heard about it was was in church. I had not really been introduced to it prior to Watchmen, if I'm being honest. It's just not something that was discussed in our classroom, probably because it's something that we want to bury in the past, because that's just typical, you want to soften the I guess the past mistakes that your country has done. And it's just one of those things that's just like I don't even know if current generations are learning about this stuff. So it's like it's just like on so many different levels it is important for this historical event to just make its way out there for more people to understand what it is. Because, and one of the themes of the episode being, the horrors that the older generation had to go through, the sacrifices they had to make in order to pave a better future or create a better future for their children. And even then, it's like they're still dealing with their own issues, their own horrors and encounters and whatnot. And so it's like, it's just like just to get to a place where they can sort of stand toe to toe. It took death, destruction, and just all of that horrendous stuff that went down. That to me was just. I know I want to hear from you specifically because I know you had a very visceral reaction to it. But like for me, that it knocked me on my ass. I was literally sitting on my couch, just like processing the whole episode once it ended.
I've seen the episode twice, man, and it's still. And we'll break that particular moment down later in the recap here. But the moment where Dora's grandmother is burning alive, knowing that literally in the same scene, Letitia tells her that she is going to die, and she knows right downstairs she can save her family or try to save her family, but she knows in doing so she's going to affect the past, and in doing so she's not going to be able to have this great grandson and then Tic. So she was willing to sacrifice her life for the greater good of her family legacy, man. And that just was like, this hit me again what you just mentioned, just the idea of my ancestors, of what they went through to get me at this point to be on your channel, to hear my voice on the internet in 2020. It's just like just a surreal moment where you just kind of rally, and you hit it on the head too. There's still things that we're dealing with in America, right? Especially during 2020 with George Floyd and all the stuff with Breonna Taylor. And it's just like history kind of repeats itself. And that's kind of
the Charlottesville stuff.
Charlottesville stuff, man. Yeah, and it's just like, we go. This episode plays with time, and yes, they're going back to 1921. But even when they come back to 1950 in this confines of the show, they're in the Jim Crow era. So it's just like this show constantly hits you on the head, where it's just like humanity. Again, we talk about the monsters, the magic and all that stuff, but it's the Captain Lancaster, it's the racism, it's the stuff that our characters are going through on a day-to-day basis, which is just horrifying within itself. So man, Misha Green and the creators, man, they got something special in their hands, man. This show just really hits me on a lot of levels, man.
Imagine saying that the Jim Crow era was a safer time to be a Black American than 1921 when this Tulsa Massacre, that's a scary thing in the show. Like, absolutely emphasize it. I mean, it's been emphasizing that the whole series, but especially when you get that contrast between where they were when they started out in the episode, and then going back in time and then coming back, and it's just like, okay, now we're in a somewhat safer environment. That that is just so eye-opening, I think.
100%, man, and again, we'll get into it from the beginning to where we're at now, the end. But yeah, it's just the journey our characters have gone through all season long, and there are some moments where our characters have their flaws. Like I still think to date, these characters are so selfish, man. It is,
dude.
I've moments, and it's just like, what are you guys doing? You can't put BS aside for 2 seconds. But again, this is why I love this show, because our characters do have those selfish moments. They do have those moments where they put themselves before others. But it's just a lot to go through,
right? For sure. Yeah, it is interesting. Some of the feuding between the characters is getting a little tiresome. I think they sort of, close the book on a little bit of that in this episode, specifically between Montrose and Tic. Granted, I say that understanding the pain that is there for Tic, and especially when in this episode when he learns that Montrose isn't even like his biological father, right? He's like, it's like, oh, he was willing to like forgive his father to an extent for like the abuse and the berating that he underwent as a kid, because he was my father. I have to love him. But when he figures that out, he's like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with you. You're not my father. Fuck you. Like it's just like you did all that. Like, I don't know, that to me was a powerful moment. And they have an amazing scene in the alleyway when Montrose goes to watch him and Thomas, and he's talking about all of this, and it's like, yes, that was my first love. Man. Yeah, the sacrifice. He's like, he's just one on the list of he's just one item or one person on a long list of sacrifices that I had to make in order to be your father. And that was one of the most powerful lines in the entire episode.
It was incredible, man. And look, Montrose is still not off the hook from Yahimi killing her, or the entity that was, and how he treats Sammy and all that stuff. But this episode, and the last few episodes, to be honest, have really kind of opened the door to Montrose's heart from the audience, and kind of seeing again that you hit it on the head, man. That scene in the alley with Montrose and Tic, man, where he's like, the sacrifices I made to be your dad, I don't care. Which, by the way, I think it is pretty confirmed that George is his dad, but there's still that he keeps saying, he uses the word maybe. He doesn't confirmly. I know back then it wasn't maybe blood test, and I did checking if the kids were yours or not, but he kept referring to maybe he's your dad, maybe. But either way, if he is his biological father or not, in the sense of like what a father means versus a dad, he is Tic's dad in a sense, even though he was a terrible father.
Oh, right. Yeah.
In a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, what Montrose did to raise him in his eyes in a matter, is his way of just like the things that he did. We talked about it last week with him saying that he saw a pastor, having an interaction with a man figure, and they called him and they put him in an asylum, and all the stuff he kind of went through to suppress his actual feelings and his sexuality. So, man, that was a beautiful scene. And Michael K. Williams, he was the hell out of that, man.
This was his episode. If there was ever an episode where he, is the star of the show, it would be this one. Sure. I mean, he just really, you could just feel the pain that he's going through throughout the entirety of this. It was
eyes,
just,
man.
I know it was just very haunting and emotional, and especially when he's like, they had several really great shots, but the shot where it's like him looking out at his town burning to the ground. And
that
seeing
doctor in town and the bakery up the street, and
that was man. That just brought it to a whole new level. It took an event that is, on paper, a historical, thing that happened and blah, 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 blah. And it personalized it. It tailored to a single individual. So we were able to connect with it even more, which I think that was like the most powerful thing about this episode, is how they were able to just, hammer home the horrors of this event and whatnot, and the effect it had on the people in the town by focusing it in on the Freemans, on Montrose as a person, and like how if it wasn't for Tic coming back in time and whatnot and their legacy, they would have died, right? Like that was I did really like that part where Tic kind of realizes that it's like, oh, the vision he had at the first episode where he's Jackie Robinson coming in and saving the day. Awesome. It's like, that's going to be him. And what a great
sprinkle of Back to the Future little theme
a
too,
little
when
bit.
he kicks the bat, man. I love that moment.
Yeah, dude, that was great. And just like the details that went into his his attire, his costume. He was wearing the shirt with the pinstripes. It's just like that was brilliant. I don't know. That was a really powerful moment. And then seeing that scene cross-cut with that of Dora's
grandmother,
grandmother, yet burning to the, like, that was so, oh my God, like,
powerful stuff, man.
Yeah, no, for real.
It's the stuff that wins you Emmys. I'll say that, man.
Sure.
It was I can't think of the director's name, man, but the interslicing with that spoken poem too. I'm forgetting the poet's name, but she's one of the, she's a huge movement in the Black art movement, and that spoken poem mixed in with the music, which is so beautifully put together. And like you said, the sequences on the screen just added more emotion to it, man. So yeah, the show, again, when it seems like their third acts, when they have conclusions, when they stick the landing, they really stick the landing. That's why I'm just like, can't even imagine what's coming next week. But man, they really did a phenomenal job of visual storytelling, the visceral nature of the brutality of what's going on, but mixed in with just the beauty of the visuals on the screen at the same time. It's just incredible stuff, man. Yeah, for sure. And I think what I also really appreciated about this was that it didn't go in the traditional, penultimate sort of route, right? It kind of told like an insular story, as it has been, for all seasons,
right?
Yeah.
But it's like, it's an interesting thing, because usually when you get the penultimate episode, it's like, okay, we're building up everything. This is the stakes. It's coming to ahead. It's like, this is actually the episode where the story climaxes, and then the finale is more of like the falling resolution and the setting up for the next season and whatnot. This show is going to have everything sort of come to a head in a finale, which is cool to see sometimes, because I think when a show does that, when they sort of blow their load in the penultimate, which is a very normal thing to do, it is very traditional. I feel like the finale becomes a little less impactful, and so it's like everyone's usually waiting for that, episode 9 or whatever. That's the big one. And I think from a thematic standpoint, and just like fully understanding the characters and all that stuff like that, I think this penultimate did do that, but we still need the conflict with Christina we need to see what's going to go on with that there. What's going to happen to Dee? Obviously now that they have the Book of Names, they can save her theoretically. How is that whole thing going to go down? How is Hippolyta changed as a result of her just like, like you said at the top, it's like she just became like the god of thunder, Thor, from Ragnarok. There's so many doors and so many avenues. Literally the episode's called Full Circle, so it'll be really interesting to see what all answers and the resolution of Christina keeping her promise to Ruby about keeping Letitia safe, but ultimately killing Tic, and now he has this pet animal on a leash somewhere that I don't know if he's going to use that again. I mean, it's so much that can be said, but again, I thought this episode, like I said, just kind of in a vacuum was such a great way to, open the door to some new possibilities for the finale, but also close the door for many different reveals. And just rewind 1921, man. It was just something to talk about, man. Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the first half of the episode though, because I think that was kind of like the setup for what's going to happen next week. So we obviously Dee is sort of in she's dying, right? And so they basically have to call Christina in order to set her back 24 hours, subdue the infection that's going on, which there's a great scene, like a very, very great like Exorcist type scene where like she is literally becoming the
autopsy creatures.
Exactly. And I was like, oh wow, that's really scary. And so them trying to figure out what to do with her, how to help her out, while still fighting amongst themselves is is a great sort of like setup for that. And then like Hippolyta comes in and boom, she's like, nope, I know exactly what we got to do. And
hey man, she was Sarah
great.
Connor, man. She was like kind of reminded me of Sarah Connor. Like what happened to Dee? She's sick, and I just kind of love that she's been on this trip, this journey of time. Where I love that moment too, where she's like, I've been on Earth 504 for 200 plus years, gaining all this knowledge. I'm gonna save my daughter, and you guys are gonna come along on this ride, regardless of your issues. So yeah, that was awesome when she kind of kicked in and became Mama Bear, coming back to protect her child.
Right, for sure. Which, the last time we saw her, that was her whole reason for returning to Earth in the first place. She's like, no, I have a daughter. I have a responsibility there, and I have to save her. So yeah, I mean, it was great. I was curious as to whether or not she was going to show up in this episode, or whether that was going to be, in the finale or something like that. But I guess like given the fact that they have to go back in time, it does make sense that she shows up here.
She's the Doctor Strange, Doctor Who of the crew now, man. She's the master of time. Yeah,
for sure. And I think the other thing that I found interesting was sort of just like, Ruby's place in all of this, and how she's like, sort of switched sides. Like she's like, maybe Christina isn't all that bad. It's like, well, look at Tic. It's like Tic is, I can't trust him. Like he's kind of unhinged and he's dangerous, and like his dad is dangerous and stuff. And it's like, you want to be with them, you trust them. I think maybe Christina has shown like time and time again that she's willing to help us out, and she's not going to like kill us or whatnot. And then obviously Leti kind of like goes back at her by saying, well, she's going to kill Tic to get what she wants. So I don't know. What did you sort of like make of like Ruby's sort of role in the top half of this episode?
Hey man, Ruby is dope. She's super badass. But man, you literally call the pot calling the kettle black, man. Like Christina has her. She's in her web. She literally has manipulated her so much that she's going against her own family, her own people, and now she's on it's seamlessly kind of on Christina's bandwagon. So that is such an interesting turn to see her, that switch of Ruby, of this woman with anger, now having she's trusting in a white person, right, and trusting Christina no less. So it is as Montrose calls her a white devil at the beginning of the episode. But it is so interesting to see that switch, and it'll be really interesting to see when the chips fall down. Will she? If Christina doesn't keep up with her word, will she look out for her sister, Letitia, man? And will she, protect her baby sister? So, yeah, that was just I was so frustrated with Ruby. Like, really, Ruby? You're telling Letitia not to trust Tic and Montrose. Yeah. They have their flaws, but you're dealing, it's like Christina got her, man. She's in her web.
For sure. And I think Christina's sort of ambition, like, it's like with each episode, Christina's plans sort of starts to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's really interesting because she's sort of like presenting herself as like a self-proclaimed like, Jesus figure or a Messiah or something like that. She's like, she's like, she doesn't want the world under her thumb. She wants to experience it, like, all the pain and all the stuff like that.
Her exact verbiage was, like you just mentioned, she wants to experience it, all of it, and in the entirety of first. So I think we talked about this maybe weeks ago when Gretchen was on, that she thinks there's some connection with her going literally back to the Garden of Eden and changing just the pendulum of how men and women are perceived in the world, and just reliving that and becoming women being more influential within the household, and the women being the money getters versus the man. So it's really interesting to see what she wants to go back in time to switch this kind of idea of how men and women are perceived in this world that's created in this universe. So yeah, it's really interesting to see what all that looks like and how she's going to essentially accomplish all that. But yeah, man.
Yeah, and it sort of recontextualizes and just sort of like it makes the scene from last week where she's killed in the same way that, Ruby described the lynching to her. And it's like, I don't know, there's just something really weird and interesting about that, because it's like, when we were talking about it initially, we're like, okay, is it coming from a place of she wants to understand Ruby's pain and her hurt, or is there something else there? And it's like, now with her, saying, like, I want to experience all of the world. It just, I don't know. I feel like there is some sort of other ambition there that I guess I haven't quite, caught on to yet, maybe because I'm an idiot, but like, it's just like an interesting thing, I guess.
I
I don't
mean,
know.
it's such an interesting conversation with Christina. We mentioned in back in episode 2 or 3 where she's playing it with the kids for the first time, and we just assume that
Yeah.
she's just been sheltered. She's never really been able to be a kid. She's never really been able to grow up in a normal life with her dad being the leader of the Order of Adam, or the Sons of Adam, and just she now is. This is one of those conversations where a kid's been sheltered their whole life, and now they have the world at their disposal. She has magic at her disposal. She wants to see it all and experience it all for the first time. When her father kept pushing her back and holding her back for not being a man, and thinking that men could only accomplish things. So it's just like she's out of that. She's breaking out of her box, and I think that's why her and Ruby communicate so well, because number one, they're both selfish characters. They're both selfish people and want to put themselves first. But then there's that connection where Ruby says she's white. Granted, she has the privilege of being white, but she's also pushing the boundaries for it regardless of her gender. So I think that's where Ruby kind of almost looks up to her and has this, emotional connection to her as well.
Yeah, that is interesting. And in this episode, Ruby even says like, I always imagined if I was white that I'd be like a redhead or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's okay. Yeah. So the whole thing is sort of starting to make sense there with them. But yeah, it's almost like she almost like views it as like a game, because like when she went through the same, torture and like, technically murder of, that happened towards the end of last week. She's like, she comes out of it laughing. Right. She's just,
this messed up in the head.
Yeah. It's like really just like something twisted there. And so it's like, while I can appreciate sort of like what she's sort of trying to do for like the larger demographic of just like women, it is like, she's doing it out of selfish reasons, obviously. So it's like not virtuous. It's like very much just like, I'm going to stick it to my father, and such. So her, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Tic seems ready to just sort of like sacrifice himself for his family, which we literally just saw the precursor to in tonight's episode. So
exactly.
I don't know. What do you think is going to happen there? Do you think that they're going to go through with that and Tic is going to die at the end of the episode, or the end of the season?
Yeah, I mean, Montrose said, and Letitia and her were talking at the object with the multiverse time machine, that there may be some alternate version that Tic makes it and he survives. And we all know it'll be interesting to see if Gia comes back in the mix, but she saw him die. So I don't know if Gia will play an integral part where we know she can take souls of the men, but can she also maybe save a soul or give a soul away or something, and seeing if she plays a part into that. And again, we know that there's time travel involved in the show now. When time travel gets into the mix, you can just you can erase everything, but there's also a son out there. He has a son in the future that has some understanding who he is, what he looks like. So there's that idea of maybe his son somehow gets to the mix. So I don't know, man. I think you just mentioned it. Dora's grandmother, his great-great-grandmother, or great-grandmother in this case, sacrificed her life for her family, and maybe Tic, poetically speaking, wants to do the same thing. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it is interesting because it's like he was, if you kind of look at it, it's like he was born to save his legacy, which also includes sort of like his father and like all of them, but then also to save his children. And so I guess in a typical way, he is like the stereotypical hero, chosen one of this story. Whether or not he's able to make it out alive, or they're able to bring an alternate version of him back and stop Christina or stuff like that, I don't know. I have to imagine that that something is going to happen that'll set up the next season, right? Like whether or not Christina dies, or maybe she's like a version of her is dead, or she just kind of gets away or something like that. I don't know, because it's like if you kill Christina, who is going to be the villain of the next season, right? You usually have to kind of get that antagonist towards the end of this.
Yeah, that's because I mean, we really, all of the chips are off the table. Well, at least we think so, because there is that line where Christina agrees to help Tic and the family in order, they exchange for, okay, Tic, you have to go back in time and relive that ritual. So in going back to time, I mean, I would imagine that means Samuel's coming back and Uncle George will be back. They go back in there. So maybe him, Samuel being this leader that he is, he might notice that this isn't right. You guys, there's been some switching the timeline. So maybe he's gonna, again, prevail and being the leader of the Sons of Adam and kill his daughter and take over the reign. So we are going, I assume, again, with Christina saying, we will be going back in time again to make this ritual come true. So we'll see.
Yeah, that'll be interesting for sure. Just because it's like we'll have experienced all this stuff, and then we're gonna go back and yeah, it's like how, like, what's gonna happen? Like, how is Christina? Yeah, I mean, is she gonna kill her whole? I assume I don't know. Like, there's just so many things.
Time travel is always when you deal with time. It's like, well, let's see how they handle this. So yeah, we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the other thing that they sort of have to resolve next episode, which it looks like that's going to be the first thing that they do, just given where the episode ends, is curing Dee, and then sort of like where does her arc sort of like go in next week's episode?
Well, that's interesting, man, because I always, it was a line that was said last week or maybe 2 weeks ago when Tic says that when he went back in the time, he saw a bunch of white people rioting. He was in the future and this, that, and the other, but then someone grabbed him. Some mechanical arm grabbed him. And I'm thinking in my head, well, we know Dee's arm is dead. It seems like they lift the curse, but is Dee somehow, like her mother, a time traveler in a sense, and this explorer of her in her own right, and she's going to be kind of playing in time and doing stuff like that. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what if we get any more of Dee's storyline, if she's going to be a pivotal character in the finale. But I think that there is still something to be said with that character and seeing her coming out of this spell and whatnot. And if there's some other remnants of Lancaster, which will that moment, I'm curious to think. How did you like that conclusion of Lancaster and kind of how that scene played out, where we still don't know who that guy in the closet was, and kinda, I guess the symbol that she put in his office stops the regeneration. I thought that was a little bit underwhelming and just kind of rushed.
I do agree with that. I do think it was a little underwhelming, but I also feel like Christina was using him the whole time, and so now that she has. I mean, I don't know. I guess there are a couple of ways you could sort of view that scene. It's like, okay, so everything's going according to plan. So like now, is it, now she has the ability to use his body? Or is that not the case because she didn't put him on life support or wherever? So he's like, he's dead. And now like her enemy is sort of out of the way. I don't know. It was interesting, but it was, we did sort of get the, not explicitly, but they did sort of explain that they have the black torsos because they're basically using the bodies of like black people as like armor for themselves, which is there's a lot of sort of like comments to be made about that. I thought that was a really
there's a whole Jordan Peele Get Out angle, right?
Yeah,
with, using black people's bodies for their own gain. So yeah,
right.
But it's still like that guy in the closet. I still don't know if that's something to bring back into because he wasn't black. He was a white guy, so I don't know what was up with that.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the things where I was like, okay, maybe he was, and I think this was the one when we had Gretchen on. We were talking about the fact that I was talking about the fact that I was like, maybe he was like having the surgery or whatever done to him, or he was going to have the surgery done to him, which is why he sort of was like making noises in the closet, like. I don't know. But yeah, it is sort of like weird the way they sort of just like cut that thread off quickly. Granted, it was probably like one of the least interesting things about the season. So I was okay with it, especially when it was like setting up Christina's whole like plan in motion and everything.
Yeah.
So
I mean, even another character, we know that Christina's very selfish in her own right, but that kind of like closure for that character, her saying that she wanted him to die at 1,000 deaths, but she'll just take the one. Just even her, she has, even though she has this grandioso plan, that even she can get to the more human levels of like revenge on her past lover and William and getting that vengeance on him. So
yeah, no, agreed. Okay, so before we wrap this up, guys, be sure again to let us know your thoughts and opinions on tonight's episode down in the comments section below. And then also, while you're down there, be sure to give this video a like if you're enjoying the content. Share it with your Lovecraft-loving friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on another Lovecraft Country recap and review show. We got one more left next week, so you're going to want to stay subscribed for that. Elliott, final thoughts? Anything else you kind of want to touch on regarding the episode?
The only thing I can think about is, we talked about the Montrose and Tic scene in the alley, but the Montrose revealing to Tic that, Uncle George might be your dad, and Tic having that moment where it's like he sat down in that very single chair wanting Uncle George to be his dad after the abuse he was being given to his father. And also the scene that we literally see a young George and a young Dora setting the stage for. I thought that when Montrose said that we had this unbreakable bond, I'm like, I didn't know that meant that you can like share your wife.
That was a little weird at first.
Vice versa. So I don't know what that all entails. Like, do you sign a contract? You can have her Wednesday, Thursday. I'll have her on weekend. So I'm really kind of confused on really the genesis of that relationship. And there's it's still a mystery box about, number one, Hannah. What happened to her all those years with the Book of Names, and how she passed the book on from generation to generation. But then number two, I'm a firm believer, no body, no death. We've never seen Dora. We don't know how she died, when she died, how long ago she died. I still think there is some thread line for Dora being in the background some way, somehow. Maybe this might be a completely unnecessary theory, but maybe she's been Christina this whole time in a sense, and the body metamorphosis. I don't know. If Dora is going to be like the villain that we're talking about.
That would be wild.
Where has she been at? But again, I think the biggest thing was just, again, the Tic finally finding out that he has a father that was his uncle, and an uncle that was his father potentially. So yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm actually glad you brought that up. The whole like sort of like triangle between the three, like, Dora, George, and Montrose. Because it is an interesting relationship, and you sort of get a taste for it in this episode. Obviously, when his dad is like beating him maliciously, and then Dora sort of comes to his defense, and then she sort of gets a little mad at George for not doing his part, being an able-bodied sibling who is also in the good graces of the parent and whatnot. But then Montrose said, and so we're starting to see like, oh, maybe George is, he wasn't necessarily there for Montrose like he should have been. But then Montrose said, like, no, that's not true. He was there. He helped me out so much. He was there for me constantly. And he, I can never repay, all that he did for me.
Except for sleeping with my wife and having a kid.
Well, here's the thing. Was that just a case of like, you do this to give me a child, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and again, that is that's a bond of like another level of brotherhood.
Right.
It's just like, I know you're a gay man. But again, to me, it's just like, was there love with Dora and George? I would have loved to have seen a scene of them. Well, I guess we got that scene where they're dancing and he's having that dream and they have that conversation. You can now fly with your, again, I'm going to rewatch this season eventually, once it's all over, but she says you can finally fly with your kids. I don't remember what else the conversation went in regards to how their relationship was. Right. Does Hippolyta know that they had this arrangement, and kind of what does that mean for, just, I don't know, Thanksgiving dinners?
yeah, it is.
Like, how did that look? But yeah, man,
it is interesting. I'm sort of the mindset where I think that, obviously they all three of them cared for one another, but I also feel like George did what he did to help out Montrose, and allow him to be accepted into society and whatnot. Right. But he always had like that hidden sort of love, or I guess it wasn't really hidden, but it was all, he always had love for Dora and whatnot. Yeah. But he had to gave up that love and the opportunity to be with her for the betterment of his brother, so his brother could survive in a society that didn't accept him, which really is
sacrifice. We talked about the sacrifice in this.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, Montrose can't be with the people that he loves, and he has a long list of sacrifices that he had to make. But George basically made the ultimate sacrifice, which was he gave up, at least, if you're going to interpret it this way, he gave up, being with, Dora for his brother. And so I think that sort of plays into episode 2 when you're getting that flashback of him dancing with her and like the regrets of not being able to do that. And so, and maybe that's exactly why Montrose says he did more for me than you'll ever know. Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, man, he's a big brother looking out for his little brother.
for
Just
sure.
like we're seeing with Ruby and Letitia, seeing if her
Yeah.
sister will make the ultimate sacrifice and protecting her sister. So again, the show just kind of somehow puts all the pieces together, and there's so many layers. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I will say this: the more that we sort of learn about George, Montrose, and Dora, and that whole thing, that is slowly starting to become like the most interesting aspect of the series to me. Just because there's a whole lot of layers there that we're like finding out through these, flashback episodes or through just like experiences and whatnot. So, basically, in conclusion, loved the episode.
Yeah.
It was a little rough towards the beginning. I mean, I understand his purpose. Not every episode is going to be like clear. Like, it's not going to be like episode 6 with Gia and everything, where it's just like one single.
Yeah.
Right. Like they needed the setup in order to do what they did in the second half and also to set up the finale. But yeah, if it was just the second half of this episode, man, it skyrocket to the top. It's already in the top 3 for me, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely loved it. Great performances, great direction, great just visual storytelling. I absolutely loved it. So there you have it, guys. Those are our thoughts on episode number 9 of Lovecraft Country, titled Rewind 1921. Again, let us know in the comments section your thoughts and opinions. We love to hear from you. Thank you, as always, to Elliott for joining me on these. Elliott, where can everyone find you?
Yeah, man. Hey, man, love it breaking it down. And finale next week, man. Crazy. But bittersweet. Yeah, man, you guys can find me here on YouTube at Movie Files, talking about TV shows like we're doing today, talking about movies, live streams about those movies and shows and all that fun stuff. So check me out there. And then, of course, on the social media accounts, when we're talking about movie news, casting news, delays for movies that will never come out and will never see the day of light. You guys can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Files and at Movie Files Live.
The dude consistently puts out just like incredible content on a regular basis. He's on top of his shit. So definitely go subscribe to his channel and follow him if you haven't done so already. Lastly, guys, you can like FilmSpeak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, just search FilmSpeak. And if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's going to do it for this recap and review of episode number 9 of Lovecraft Country. And we will catch you back here for the finale next week. Take care.